Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others, aspiring to be them, can follow in their footsteps. Here's your host, Jacob Wells.
All right, welcome to Latte with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Jacob Wells, and today I'm really excited because we have a great episode for you. We're going to be talking about insurance litigation and business law with David Heemann of Heemann Law Group. Here's our guest, David Heemann. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks so much for spending some of your time with us today. Before we get into the episode, I have to ask you, since it is called Latte with the Lawyer, what is your morning beverage of choice? What gets you fired up in the morning to take on your cases?
You know, a really, really good cappuccino. There's a little place outside of Versailles, France, that I learned the art and perfection of how to make cappuccino. Really? It's an Italian restaurant in France, but yes, and ever since then, I'm hooked.
Did you buy like a fancy espresso machine after that and get really into all the, variables that make it perfect?
I probably paid more than I should have for a coffee maker, but not the multi-$1,000 thing. And do enjoy the craft of frosting the milk and composing it, bringing it together.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. It's definitely like a very meditative thing, the coffee making process. So that's cool to hear that you're so into that. So besides for the coffee, we're gonna be talking about the business litigation side of things today, and I'm really curious to hear how you got into law in the first place, and then how you got into, as you say, being a lawyer's lawyer and working in insurance litigation specifically.
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to go to law school. Just really enjoyed that aspect of understanding the law. I was very much interested in the Constitution. My undergraduate degree is in criminal justice, and timing and expense. I actually ended up going to work after getting my master's in forensics and started working in insurance as a claims adjuster. And really glad that I did. I waited about 5 years into my career before I went back to law school. And I think having that experience of learning some of the lingo, much about law is just understanding some of the language. And it gave me some introduction to aspects of tort law, contract law. I began to understand a lot about procedure. So by the time then I went into law school, it didn't seem so foreign to me. And I think that really helped in my success. A lot of my peers were right out of undergrad, and they were learning the language as it went along. So for me, it's always been a passion, something I wanted to do, and really kind of glad that I waited, a little bit after undergrad to go into it.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a different direction to go from the forensic side of things. What was that like working with forensics early on in your career?
I never really worked in the criminal aspect field. I used that application in insurance and investigations.
Oh, I see.
I worked special investigations and fraud in Southern California, which was very interesting in the early 90s. So from that aspect, a lot of accident reconstruction. I used the same skills in building consulting for construction defect litigation or building failure analysis from an insurance coverage standpoint. So those skills and that knowledge of investigation, followed me throughout my career.
Yeah, amazing. What do you think is a specific skill? I'm just thinking about insurance companies and lawyers going after them. What makes insurance companies so difficult to work with? Why do they not want to, file the claims? And what is a way that you handle that?
I think a lot of it is perception and culture, meaning from the public and the plaintiff bar to a large degree. In the claims department, we always say, we didn't write it. we're more than happy to pay it. We pay what is owed under the policy. We look for coverage. Whenever your claim comes in, the first thing an adjuster does is they evaluate the coverage. If it's not something that they feel they can comprehend, they may go to counsel, either in-house or outside counsel, and say, hey, can you help me understand this language? And that, sometimes takes time, or sometimes you need additional information from the insured or opposing counsel to say, hey, look, I'm trying to understand what the allegations are here so I can apply those to the policy. But all in all, most adjusters, really, they don't take it personal. The claims individually, they do. They see a lot of catastrophic losses, a lot of hard things to see over their career. But at the end of the day, they take each claim individually, uniquely, evaluate it, and present the offer. And oftentimes, opposing counsel may not be happy with that offer, or they feel that they're being lowballed. But oftentimes it comes down to the adjuster needing additional information. They're not seeing the claim the same way the claimant is, or the attorney, because they don't have the information yet. And that sometimes often will lead it into litigation, simply because the adjuster doesn't have the information they need to evaluate the claim. The attorney thinks they provided everything. They get frustrated, they file suit, and we end up, in the discovery process, which is why most claims that, while suit might be filed on the few, they settle well before it gets before a jury. I think the number is less than 4% end up in suit.
Oh, wow.
And less than 1% actually are tried to verdict.
Is there anything currently with the insurance companies that you'd say is noteworthy, like something happening at the moment that is really in the forefront of everything that you guys are seeing?
Technology has really come a long way, which moves information more quickly, which allows the claims professional to more quickly evaluate it, counsel to more quickly evaluate the exposure. It used to be medical records could take 6 months to get. And now with technology, a lot of medical providers are having electronic access to records, so we can get that medical information much more quickly, get it out to the experts, let them evaluate it, and get an opinion back. And so I think that's one noteworthy area that's moving much more quickly. The other aspects are really more customer service, not really from a legal standpoint, but the nice to haves for the community, as far as being an insured with a carrier, being able to report your claim online. I had a claim, last year I broke my windshield. I did the entire thing online. They set up the appointment with the glass company. They showed up, never talked to anybody, didn't need to talk to anyone. And so I think that technology is moving forward. From a litigation standpoint, we're still kind of in the old ways.
Right. So with the windshield incident specifically, how long did it take from start to finish for you to file that claim and then get reimbursed?
And actually, the nice thing was the file the claim took me probably 5 minutes. Literally, just logged in, said I broke my windshield. It had a little drop down. Do you want to have someone repair it, or are you going to get it repaired? I said, I want someone to repair it. They said, you would like an appointment? I said, yes. And I never came out of pocket. They scheduled me. It took them about, because COVID, things were kind of odd. It took them about a week to schedule a time where I could get my truck to them and replace the windshield. But never came out of pocket. It's nice.
Interesting. I definitely think that the technology that's a recurring answer in terms of where things are going, just in general within the legal industry. It's very fascinating to see how things have changed. And I guess I'm curious, over your extensive career, was there a specific case that you're really proud of, was a really exciting case to work on? Anything that comes to mind?
Being in the insurance world, there's so many unique things. We never say, well, God, I've seen that 100 times, because every time it's a little bit different. Whether it be a products case or a slip and fall, an auto accident, multi-car auto accident, and you're trying to figure out what happened. So they're really, each one is unique because the individuals involved in the case and the claim are unique. The insurers are unique, the plaintiff is unique, the plaintiff lawyer is unique, defense counsel's personality. Sometimes a suit may come in, the insured already has their own counsel on it, and the insurance company is simply going to pay their attorney to continue to defend that because they're the one most knowledgeable. They might have a certain personality that might be driving something on the plaintiff side. And looking at all these dynamics, as you begin to manage that litigation, it's just as important, of understanding the law, and for us, the coverage and the valuation and the liability exposure, who the people are, what is motivating them, what is driving them. I did have a case in California many years ago where it was a product issue, some repairs to a vehicle, a person was entering onto a freeway, and they had a catastrophic failure with the vehicle that resulted in an accident. And we worked extremely hard to try and get the claim resolved. And I was at a mandatory settlement conference with the court, and plaintiff counsel was kind of upset, frustrated. And I said, Your Honor, I said, we're ready to go. We're ready to go to trial. If you want to pick a jury, we've done everything we can do to try and get this resolved. Plaintiff counsel got a little upset about that. The judge looked at him and said, hey, Mr. Heemann's been in front of this court many times. If he tells you he's ready to go, he's ready to go. And you better be ready too. What's going on here? Yeah. And so the three of us talked, and the judge actually told us, why don't you guys go get lunch? And he wanted to spend some time with the plaintiff and talk with her, which was unusual. But it allowed us, we went and had lunch. We had a great time, talked about everything but the case, from sailing to food that we liked and wine. Yeah. Just a great conversation. We came back, the judge brought us in and said, I think I can get this resolved. And it turned out that there were some personal issues that she was embarrassed about and didn't necessarily want to talk about, but were actually driving and motivating why she was hanging on to this case. And the judge was able to talk with her and help her move forward. And for me, the willingness of plaintiff counsel to step back, the willingness of the judge to look at the person, not, okay, this is just one more matter on my calendar, was really important. That judge was almost acting like a mediator in many ways. So I always remind everyone, the people involved are just as important as understanding the facts as the law in getting a case resolved or deciding to try it.
Yeah, I love that story. That's so beautiful how everybody came together and worked it out. And yeah, that's amazing. You don't really hear that too often, like you said. So that's great to hear. The other thing I'm curious about is, you were talking to your friends about sailing, food. Is there anything, just, it doesn't even have to be a law book, like something that you would recommend an aspiring lawyer to read? Because I think what I've been learning as I'm talking to these people is that there's so many extracurricular hobbies or books that you can read that can really help you take the next step as a lawyer and have that edge. So is there anything that comes to mind that isn't related to law that could help an aspiring lawyer have that edge?
It's really an interesting question, because I don't think a lot of people think about that. They think, well, to be a good lawyer, you study the law, you stay up on the law, you practice the law, and you immerse yourself in it. And all of the successful lawyers I know all have something else they do that in their mind is their relaxation or distraction, But when you really start to look at what they're doing, it also impacts their practice of law. I have several good friends that are winemakers. I make wine as well. I'm getting already actually got my contracts for my grapes in the fall.
Nice.
And as we talk about it, it's gives us what we need for the law because, for example, winemaking, it's very structured in many ways. There are scientific data that tell you when you should harvest. There's scientific data that tells you which yeast strains you should use and when you should press and how long you should leave it on oak. But then at the end of the day, you have to go out into the vineyard and taste the grapes. And the science might say, yeah, it's time to harvest, but you taste it and you rely on that creativity and that sense of, yeah, it's time. Or when you're evaluating your wine, deciding to pull it off oak, it's your palate. And the law is very much like that. We live in a very confined and restrained environment of rules. But if you look at what makes really great case law, is somebody came up with a creative argument. They looked at what was existing, they looked at their case, and they said, yeah, I know I'm right. How do I get there? And they write that argument, and the court looks at it and goes, yeah, you know what? You're right. I had a professor in law school who said, if you don't know the law, argue what you think it ought to be, because that might just be the right new law. And so I would encourage a young lawyer to find a hobby that engages them creatively, analytically, and challenges them, because as you do those type of things like sailing is very creative, but yet there's science. You trim the sails a certain way, you sail the boat a certain way, but at the end of the day, it's you're feeling it. You feel the wind, you feel how the boat's responding, and you make those slight adjustments based on that. And that, I believe, makes you a better lawyer because you're not so focused with blinders on that, well, this is the law, this is what it has to be. You need to be able to creatively look at that law and say, yes, I see what they're saying here, but I think, we could do something else. At the same time, whether it be mediation, trying to resolve a conflict, it could be a breach of contract situation, you have to sometimes step back and say, all right, what is in the best interest of my client, getting this resolved? And how do I get that resolved? Well, I can't just sit here and, pound the table and say, well, the law is on my side. Yes, but at the end of the day, you need to be creative and thoughtful in how you approach that resolution that's going to be in the best interest of your client, which is extracting them from that litigation.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think that the analogy of the winemaking process to law that's really spot on. It's preparation meets your taste and, kind of figuring it out on the spot. Whether it be reacting to juries and trying to use that intuition, like you said. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to have to taste that wine when it's ready. I'm practically salivating here. But thank you so much for taking the time today. If anybody is inspired by the podcast, is there a way that you recommend them to reach out or find you online?
Yeah, certainly. Can be found on LinkedIn. David Heemann, that's Heemann, or feel free to shoot me an email. My personal email is david.heemann, that's Heemann @gmail.com.
All
I really
right.
appreciate you having me, Jacob. Thank you.
Thanks so much. This has been Jacob Wells for Latte with the Lawyers. Thanks again to David Heemann of Heemann Law Group for joining us today. And I want to thank our sponsor as well, EmotionTrac without a K, that uses artificial intelligence and mobile app audiences to economically and quickly gather focus group research and data for trials and mediations. Thanks so much, David.
Thank you.